Hi, and welcome to the Human Side of Business podcast. I'm Ange McCabe, CEO and co-founder of Intuitive Performance. I'm a performance coach, HR professional, whole person leadership facilitator, and your host. The Human Side of Business podcast is fueled by the genuine curiosity to understand how personal characteristics and skills can be leveraged to drive individual and team performance, tangible outcomes, and ultimately organizational success within business. Each podcast is devoted to sharing knowledge, expanding our learning edges, and exploring the trends in corporate culture towards growing the emotional intelligence of organizations. I'm so glad you're here. Hello, and a warm welcome to Jess Ringenberg, who's empowering working moms for transformative workplace change. Jess Ringenberg is a founder, mom, and advocate for working moms. She left a career in biotech to start Elixir and dedicate herself to closing systematic gaps in the workplace for mothers after her own experience navigating motherhood in a corporate system without support. Jess became now I've had to practice this word a few times, so let's see
Yes,
how
yes,
well I
yes.
do. I just became a matricine expert, a certified coach, and an advocate for self-coaching to create business-focused programs that properly support moms at work. These programs are designed to foster cultures of education, coaching, and self-coaching within companies, turning them into empowering spaces for all mothers to work, thrive, and lead. Welcome to the show. I'm so thrilled to have you here today.
Thanks, Ange. I'm so happy to be here, and I've so enjoyed getting to know you. So thank you for hosting me today.
Yes, of course. So let's dive right in. Can you tell us about your leadership journey in the biotech sector?
Absolutely. I followed the traditional path that most of us do, and I built a career and climbed the ladder and really made a huge impact in a space that I was very passionate about.
Mhm,
And I enjoyed my career. I enjoyed all of the individuals I worked with and was extremely successful. And
mhm.
then I got to a place in my career that I think my 20-year-old self would have said, "You did it. You did the thing that you've always wanted to do." And I had the title, the leadership role, and the responsibility and autonomy to really make an impact in the space. And I worked with so many individuals that were really struggling, specifically women and mothers. So,
Mhm.
you know, my career journey would have never anticipated to go down the path that it did. But through my experiences and the people I engaged with and learned with, and the impact I was able to make, it's led me to where I am today. So I'm extremely grateful. So the last 10 years I spent in the rare disease space and in the biotech industry and was really passionate about that space. Coincidentally, grew up in the biotech space, but followed in the parental steps of life and ended up in an industry that was really, really quite rewarding. But after getting certified as a professional coach, I realized I wanted to do something else. So
Mhm.
happy to chat about that today.
Absolutely. And leadership in such a dynamic field must come with some of its unique sets of challenges and learning opportunities. Can you share some of your biggest, I guess, aha moments, kind of climbing that corporate ladder from a leadership perspective?
Absolutely. There's a book by Dr. John Whitmore, I'm sure you've read it, on coaching in the corporate space and professional coaching. And one of the things that was transformative for me in my leadership role, my mentor role, coaching others, was leading with EQ, emotional intelligence, is always going to be a leading indicator for success. Far and
Mm,
wide, it will surpass IQ, technical skills. And I think that, the name of your podcast really sits well with my experience in leadership, which is bringing humanity into the workplace and
mhm,
remembering that at the intersection of our careers, that we are just humans all trying to thrive and flourish in our own way. So, um, I think leading with empathy and emotional intelligence and really making space for people to be the people they are
mhm,
leads to diversity, why, the bottom
mm,
line,
mm,
retention, engagement. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. So for me, leadership was people and recognizing people where they are and what does that individual need. And I think we also we don't do a good enough job in the corporate space to consider what the hurdles actually are that exist within in corporations or
Mm-hmm.
teams, our individual contributors.
Mm-hmm.
For me, I recognized how many leaders I worked with made assumptions day in and day out about
Oh, you're
others.
speaking to me. Yes.
Oh man, and I can't tell you how many times just saying to a peer or another leader in an org, well, did you ask? Did you ask what they think, what they need, what
Yep.
they believe to be the problem? And how many companies bring in external consultants in and outside sources of information, and they don't simply just ask their most valuable resource, the people that they employ. So Q, emotional intelligence, empathy, actively listening, asking really good questions of the people that you employ, um, was what I loved, and there wasn't enough of it. So now I get to bring more of it into the workplace.
That's fabulous. We know that collaboration is crucial in biotech. What was your approach to fostering collaborative environments within the teams that you'd worked with?
Absolutely. What a great question. So I think it's any industry, whether it's biotech, tech, retail, consumer goods, whatever it is, collaboration comes from cross-functional vulnerability, meaning
Mm.
one party on one team will vulnerably engage and not worry about how their question, their insights will be perceived without fear on the other side. And the other side cross-functionally is willing to hear and listen without judgment or assumptions. And
Yes.
so collaboration comes from like two humans coming to voice opinions, ideas, and insights, and the other human openly listening,
Mm,
curiously responding, and
mm,
innovation happens. So,
mm,
collaboration comes from vulnerably being humans,
mhm.
which again goes back to all of the prior thoughts I had.
Amazing. Amazing. I love this answer. And help me understand, because there's a lot of situations, whether intentional or not, in biotech, sciences, life sciences, tech itself, where there's highly competitive spaces. And
Mm.
so, loving the words cross-functional vulnerability, where that doesn't naturally thrive, how can you infuse that into culture and organizations?
I mean, it's why I founded my company Elixir, is to bring a coaching mindset in. I think it is human nature and the human condition to lean more towards, um, you know, what if they perceive me as weak for asking for help? What
Mhm.
if they are telling me how to do my job? And this like negativity bias bubbles up in our minds, and we assume the worst intent. We assume malintent, or we feel judged, or all of these feelings that stop us from just being open.
Mhm.
And I think that could really make a huge difference in conversations.
Mhm.
um, I also think if you're talking about cross-functional vulnerability, it's having radical candor and having conversations and removing the word confrontation from it.
Mhm.
Sometimes uncomfortable conversations and reaching out cross functionally feels like confrontation or like a negative topic that's going to come up. But if we focus on the back end result, which again is coaching mindset, on a
Mhm.
resolution or outcome, you
Mhm.
get really innovative conversations. You get really great united conversations. You get team building, a culture of building. Um, and I think if you have a culture of fear, hesitation, you know, judgment, doubt, these things that don't belong in the workplace, but there and exist because we don't talk about the human side of business at work enough.
Mm. I tend to agree with you. And what was bubbling up for me are things like really understanding that all of us as human beings first walk into the workplace, and that veneer cannot be held up. It's a facade, right?
Yeah.
At the end of the day, we want to connect, whether that's by way of, using your words again, cross-departmental or cross-functional vulnerability, meaning that when I say something to Jess, I'm expecting Jess to accept me and
Mm.
not so much identify if Jess is right or wrong, or, contravene what I'm saying or debate it, but rather just sit in that moment with me and be curious, whether it's because She genuinely wants to know what Ange is saying, or she just wants to understand Ange. Or she really loves the idea that Ange has and wants to kind of like have a jam session. So all of those things were kind of percolating in my mind as to like the how to is really important when it comes to these types of techniques and approaches in the workplace. So yes, you're absolutely on to something for sure.
I love the word veneer too. I mean, how many times is vulnerability perceived as a weakness? And so we do
Ugh,
have to put like this veneer of strength on.
yes.
And when you're like holding up this like armor of strength and you don't show up authentically who you are, the other person's not either. Of course, it feels heavy, confrontational. You won't get cross
Mhm.
functional collaboration.
Mm,
I remember, at one of the organizations I was at, they did a high performing teams workshop across a lot of different facets of the org. And they would say, let's assume good intent from everybody.
mhm,
And I also feel like it should be just assuming no intent. It's not good or bad. Let's just have
mhm.
conversations and be curious about what they're trying to say
That's
and
fair.
seek to understand each other. And maybe they really did get their feelings hurt from a conversation. Be open to hear, how they perceived or received some
I
sort
think
of
that's fair.
feedback, right? And
Yes.
it's like, if we don't have this armor of defensiveness up, or this armor of strength, and we just come to a topic or a conversation as humans, then we're much more productive. And I think in the biotech industry, it's very high pressure and high stress.
Yes.
You've got numbers to hit and performance parameters and metrics, and we need to give individuals coping skills to handle all of that so they don't take it out on each other and we don't
Mhm.
have that confrontation feeling.
Absolutely. There were so many things that you said there. I'm trying to remember to go in sequence. So you'd said something with regards to individuals and how they're perceiving conversations. So specifically, we're told by facilitators or consultants, or even maybe our supervisors or managers, that we need to feel good in conversations. I absolutely adore that you've normalized the fact that we have feelings and we also have the right to feel different feelings, not all just same like that same checkbox of feelings within that meeting. um, it resonates because oftentimes we don't want to deal with the discomfort or the ick,
Mm,
right? And I
mm-hmm.
think what you're pointing to is allowing everybody to have their own outlook or own lens, their own experiences, and it's really important to speak to those as well if they differ from the majority, because nobody should be walking away from the table having needs unmet.
Mm,
There should
mm-hmm.
be some neutrality there. I enjoy that immensely.
Yeah, I mean, I think it also allows people to come with problems to resolve. What if it's a pattern? What if
Yes.
there is what if it's a learning experience for an individual? I go back to moms, for example, working mothers,
Mm,
and they're navigating the impossible. They're navigating intensive workplace expectations, intensive parenting expectations. And, in the workplace, they need to be able to bring to the table, and vocalize and self advocate and celebrate their wins and do all these things. And you want it to be received like a human. You want the
mhm,
reception of that information to be okay, for there to be
mhm,
a place to have feedback for leaders, teams, cross-functionally, whatever that is.
mm,
And we have to lead by example. We as leaders have to be able to do that to create psychologically safe places for all of our employees.
absolutely. Speaking of that, as a female leader, have you ever encountered specific challenges, especially when it comes to being a mom, or in a more male dominated environment, or being a female leader on itself? I'd love to hear your expressions as to, or your experiences as to those types of things.
Yeah, I would say, the biggest issue is the visibility of the intersection of who we are, meaning, for women in the workplace since the industrial era, it was really built for a male workforce. And
Yes.
that's facts, right? That's not, trying to paint a picture one way or the other. It was built for a male workforce. And then through the 50s, 60s, and 70s, more women were in the workforce than ever before. And then in the 80s, we really assimilated into a workplace. You even saw women wearing power suits and shoulder pads, and we were sitting arm in arm at a table. And post feminist era, you had a lot of women in the workforce. And somewhere along the way, motherhood was kind of deleted at that table.
Right.
these women were at the table, but their motherhood side wasn't. So I would say visibility to the intersection of the other part of that human who's on your team, the other part of the human who's leading you, the fact that they have a robust amount of responsibility outside of the workplace, which is
Mm,
raising children or
mm,
caregiving or being a
mm,
parent, right?
mm, mm.
And so the biggest gap for me were the women and mothers I supported and worked with. I myself, as a mother, now have a 10-year-old and 6-year-old. And so for a decade, I was working in an industry and I felt like I couldn't show up fully as the mother I was. I had to
Yes.
be a successful female and I
Yes.
can do it too, right?
Yes.
And there was just something wrong with that because it's leading to burnout. It's leading to women leaving the workforce. It's leading to retention and engagement issues.
Yep.
And so when you ask like what was the biggest issue, I think it was women being told it's okay to also be a mother and it's okay to show that side of yourself. I can't tell you how many women and mothers I work with where they can't even calendar time to pump at work if they're a new mom, just returned to work. If they want to go to a kindergarten graduation, the fear of also being a mom and saying, I want to go to my child's kindergarten graduation. I mean,
Yep.
these are real life scenarios, real case studies of
Absolutely.
you can't show up as your whole self. And
Hmm.
there's a problem with that.
Absolutely. I remember too relating as a mom when I first had my son, I would be absolutely mortified if I had a little bit of spit up on my sweater
Mm,
that didn't come off or something like that. Like I'd be late for work because I just felt like I had to change, not just wipe it off. I would be, basically it got to the point where I felt like I still had to operate as and the leader in this
mm,
organization of what she led. And what happened was ultimately my son started calling his grandmother mom. And that, right? And
mm,
that just blindsided me and changed the way that I looked at everything. And I was like, no, no, I need to reprioritize 100% because I was still working like 60-hour work weeks. I was still competing with individuals that didn't have the same culture that I
mm-hmm,
now had.
mm-hmm.
And I was terrified, maybe owning some of it. I think that it had to do with confidence in hindsight, but still, I didn't fully feel safe to be like, yeah,
Yes.
I'm super tired because my son didn't sleep and he's sick,
Mm-hmm.
or
Yeah.
brushing off the fact that I went to work with 5 hours of sleep because I was at the hospital for most of the night
Right.
with my son, like so it resonates absolutely when you say that. If anything, it like brings up a whole wave of
Mm-hmm.
historic emotion that women, I would only imagine, all go through in the
Yes.
workplace.
Absolutely. It's interesting because I just had a conversation with a chief human resources officer this morning, working on some programming that we want to do.
Hmm.
And we start talking about their return to work policy, which is a mandate. Um, and so that's something that can't change. But what can change is building a culture of empathy and understanding at the office for all of the other requirements that are going to happen for the parents there and the mothers.
Absolutely.
And the stats don't lie. I mean, 60% of mothers have negative mental health. 43% of mothers are leaving the workforce in the first 1 to 5 years. Women receive a 4% or a 6% pay cut with every child they have. And so
What?
like, yeah, I
This
mean,
is
it's
totally
it's
new information to me. Tell
it's
me more.
the motherhood tax is a real live thing.
Wow.
Um, because we haven't created an environment to say the motherhood brain is extremely powerful. Companies who have 1 out of 4 female executives have 10x profits, but
Right.
43% leave. So you can see the bucket is pretty leaky getting women to leadership roles. And we have to start from the very beginning of these women and mothers' career by saying, you matter, motherhood matters. Let's create flexibility. We want to retain you because they're valuable to the culture and the organization.
Absolutely.
So, going back to visibility, start talking about it, start having conversations. If you're going to mandate employees being in the office, and what's a win for the employee? What's something that
Mm,
matters for them? And maybe it's creating educational programming, training for leaders so that they can, it shouldn't be dependent on the lucky leader you get. I can't tell
no.
you how many survey results I get where moms and women feel like it just depends on who your leader is. And that's not okay either.
No, absolutely not. I'm a strong believer, just that in every organization, to be competitive and successful in the coming years, there needs to be clear and equivalent training
Mm,
tracks for all levels of leaders, not just the C-suite or the quote unquote chosen ones. And strongly believe that for teams to be set up for success, they need to understand what type
mhm.
of expectations and leadership skill sets are required, both the technical and, the human side of things, the soft skills, right?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely.
I love that, which is why part of the programming we do with Elixir is leadership training. So, at the start of the show, we talked about the fact that I'm a matrescence expert, and matrescence is the transformational journey a woman goes through when she becomes a mother, but it's ongoing forever. It's
Mm.
bio, psycho, socio, relational. We see cognitive remodeling, neuroplastic events. In fact, it's the biggest transformational neuroplastic event, developmental stage a human will go through in the shortest amount of time. So if we create so if we create supportive
Let,
environment, go ahead.
let's pause for a second. So, and I'm so sorry to cut you off because I'm really excited about this idea. So let's hold on to this thought for a second. So women go through the largest neuroplasticity exercise or function of the brain, and yet we're in, generally speaking, environments that do not utilize those changes for the purpose of innovation. Like, to me, it's like, what the heck? What's going on
Yes.
here?
Yes,
Like,
which is
why are we stifling this out?
yes, which is what we call it, the power of the mother brain. And if we realize that if you retain women in that first most peak pivotal period of neuroplasticity, if
Mm,
you support them during the peak need time, then the reward and ROI for that individual and the organization is very long lasting because they become highly effective. Their executive functioning, their EQs through the roof. As mothers, they will pay out in spades for the rest of their life on their capabilities, but we're losing them during their peak support time, which is
mm.
why matrescence education shouldn't just happen for mothers themselves to support themselves with self coaching tools and education and understanding, but for leaders to understand, hey, these individuals are at risk for postpartum depression, mental health issues.
Yes,
It's a real challenge at the beginning. It's really,
absolutely.
really hard.
Mhm.
And furthermore, they're not going to be the same woman they were before they left maternity leave, but they will be stronger, grittier, more resilient, and more beneficial to this workforce if we keep them.
Absolutely. Not only that, the level of analytical problem solving that comes into play. And I don't want to confuse this with multitasking, because nobody's good at multitasking at any given point. But what I've noticed within my peer group, business and otherwise, that are moms, the ability to provide multiple solutions is
Mm,
minimally 2 to 3x. This is subjective in the sense of numbering. However, it's definitely a trend in the sense of the pointed skill sets that can come about when
mm.
you nurture yourself as a mother and a leader.
Absolutely. I mean, think about the brain that can read an infant that cannot speak and figure out what they need in that moment.
Yes.
That brain is being remodeled and rewired for peak functioning the rest of that human's life. Not to say anybody else's brain is less effective, but
No.
we're losing a really powerful brain. In fact, 1 out of 10 men will experience postpartum depression, and they also go through a major neuroplastic event after having children. And any caregiver that will tend to a child will also go through significant neuroplastic remodeling as well. And it's like, man, that brain is so malleable. Let's get to work. Let's give them the skills to thrive and flourish as a human. Let's let them grow this business, innovate, as you said, and
Yeah,
provide
yeah.
EQ to our culture. Get them
Yes.
to the C suite leader level where
Yes.
we get to see the profits realized of supporting a woman in early motherhood.
And I think this comes back to a few things. Why would we do something, or why would we change something if it's not actually broken, right? So
Mm,
the pain isn't big enough yet, that like that in a lot of companies. And again, generalized opinions here. The other thing that comes up for me too is you said a lot about EQ or emotional intelligence. Agreed, 100%. I think there's this silent thing in the room that we have been circling but not touching upon in the past decade, and that's called the culture quotient. And what
Mm,
you're pointing to is wraps around the thought process of our culture quotient, because what we're meaning is, how do we understand different cultures? And a culture could be, Angie's culture is this type of music, this type, she's a mom, she's into sports, she has hypothyroidism, so there's this, that, the other thing, right? So Ange has her own culture. And what we're trying to do, not poo-pooing, but there's an and here when it comes to diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging and accommodations. It's missing the fact that there isn't one person that's the same out there.
mm,
And when we start to look at it from a culture quotient perspective, this allows us to extend the boxes. It's
mm-hmm.
not just a few boxes, it's not seven, because quite frankly, we have over 32,000, or excuse me, 3,200 cultures across the
Yep.
world. And then you break that down into individuals and what their own culture is that they're bringing into the workplace. Well, that personifies it. And mom is not a culture box. And it really should be tying things back together, essentially. And in my world, that's what I believe.
I love the phrase culture quotient, and I kind of envision in my mind like intersectionality of a human, like all the different intersections of who
Yes.
they are.
Yes.
Um, and what's interesting is I've talked about this in like ERG and women's groups is motherhood is actually not DEI, right? It is not a inclusivity problem. It's half of the workforce. There are more women in the workforce than ever before, and almost 90% of women will become mothers by the age of 44.
Right.
So this is not like, a small check the box problem. This is half of your workforce that is underserved.
Yes.
Period. And
Yes.
so I love the fact that you're saying like let's remember all the different parts of people and who they are and expand to motherhood, but motherhood spans race, ethnicity, sexual preference. It goes all across the board because regardless of who you are, you're probably work with for or are a mother or caregiver.
Yes. Yes.
Um and I think it's the point that's underserved. And the work that we're doing at Elixir is so critical because there are policy changes that are going to have to happen in the near future. Pay
Mhm.
equity, maturing leave benefit programming. There's so many countries that are far, far surpassing what we provide in the US. Um, and I think the work has to start with education on matrescence, empathy building across organizations, and then tying it to the bottom line
Yeah.
to the business. And there's a massive, massive business case to why it matters to support women and mothers in the workforce.
Absolutely. And when it comes to CQ, I didn't make this up. I'm not the founder. It's been around since like decades, I want to say. I need to go back and find my actual stats, but all this to say, it's not a concept that's that old. I believe it was like early 2000s, if I remember
Mm,
correctly, from an academia standpoint, and we've forgotten about that. We've blown it up into the diversity and DEIB, and there's a lot of people that are being excluded. So to your point,
yeah,
half the workforce are moms, and that's not being talked about. And there is a business case. It's full stop there. I think that there's a level of discomfort in
mm-hmm,
addressing that
yes.
because of fear of retribution from potentially HR side of things, labor boards, human rights, etc. As companies. So I think that, to your point, there's a lot of education that needs to come about to understand what we're really missing upon, and if in fact we're looking to thrive as an organization, what are we ignoring here, and how can we make it
Absolutely.
differently? And it doesn't cost a lot of money. It costs curiosity, not costs, it incurs curiosity, losing judgment, and being able to compromise or look at extending what the company culture looks like.
100%. I know where many of your audiences leaders are in the HR space, and I can tell you that there are many leaders that we've either workshopped with or coach engaged with, and they want to be comfortable to have these conversations. They want to be able to navigate this and support their teams. They just don't know how. And
Yes.
then on the flip
Yes.
side, the women and mothers want to go to their leaders to have conversations and they don't know how. So we have to
Mm-hmm.
equip individuals to have uncomfortable conversations. And it doesn't have to be an HR topic or HR issue. If they feel like, I don't know the answer, let me get you the support you need, right? Like that's going
100%.
back to vulnerability of
Yeah.
it's okay to not know, but at least create a place they can go find out.
Yeah.
And the other piece is like community. It's quite lonely. So many of the mothers I work with on online communities or inside programming within organizations, they feel alienated, they feel alone. It's very, shameful and guilt ridden to be a working mom today. And they don't have a place to go feel supported together
Yeah,
either. So
I agree with you. And I'm also curious about what is that thing? Like when you talk about guilt, shame, feeling alone, it resonates with me as a female and a mom. And I can't tell you what is the trend across workplace cultures that allows for this to take place.
hmm I think it's modern work today. So there's a great podcast with Ezra Klein and Caitlin Collins. She's a renowned sociologist and she looks at the pro family corporate space in Sweden.
Mm-hmm.
And they discuss how modern parenting today requires intensive parenting. We actually spend more time with our children today than we ever have before, including men.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But we also work more than we ever have in history.
Yes.
So we have no time for ourselves. Our well being is not a priority because there's no time for it. And so if we don't have time for ourselves, we don't have time for social engagements, we don't have time for friends or things that fill our cups up and to recharge. And so imagine as a working mother, for example, those feelings of guilt, shame come from not discussing things with others who mirror back to you that they're going through something similar.
Mm-hmm.
And so giving people a place to feel united and not so alone in storytell in the workplace, outside of the workplace, that's a game changer also. And it's the same for working fathers and parents. It's
Mm-hmm.
just lonely because we're intensive in everything we do except our own personal well-being.
Right, right. Absolutely. And so help us understand at Elixir, what are you striving to do?
So, our goal is to rewire and revolutionize the workplace for working moms and women. And we do
Mm-hmm.
that through matrescence education at every level, overviewing the entire change that women and mothers will go through and the benefit to the workforce to keep those women in place.
Mm-hmm.
We also do 90-day embedded programming so that every leader feels comfortable to navigate hard conversations, has a coaching mindset, and that the women and mothers and parents and caregivers all have self coaching. They can really flourish and shine and fill their cups up because, like we just discussed, there's not enough time for well being, and most well being programs fail
Mm-hmm.
because they're expected to be done outside of the workplace.
Mm-hmm.
And so the Health Summit data just came out and it said that most of those programming and benefits provided by orgs will fail outside of the workplace. So if we provide during work hours self-coaching skills and tools to lift yourself up and
Yep.
navigate the self-talk and self-dialogue,
Mm-hmm.
imagine what would happen between a leader who has a coaching mindset and an individual who's been self-coaching, like the sky's the limit.
Absolutely.
And so ongoing sustained community with group coaching, giving
Mm-hmm.
places. So we have group coaching provided for organizations. So women and mothers have a place to go outside of HR and their leaders to feel supported at work as well.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. I absolutely love your mission, values, and what you stand for, Jess. If we were looking to reach back out to you, how do we get a hold of you?
Please, please, please visit our website at Elixir, Elixr, coaching.com. There's only one I because there's only one I. There's only one mom, and we have to take care of her. And at the intersection of career and motherhood is the woman that needs to be taken care of at work. So please visit our website, the full story there on all the programming, how to reach us and contact us. And we can't wait to support your teams, your leaders, and the women and mothers that work inside your organizations.
Thank you so much for joining me today, Jess.
Thanks for having me, Ange.
Thanks for listening to the Human Side of Business podcast. I'm glad you could join us. If you enjoyed today's episode and want to stay updated with our latest content, make sure to visit our website. The link can be found in the episode description. where you can subscribe to the podcast, sign up for our newsletter, and learn more about our whole person leadership services. Sounds interesting? Explore the Whole Person Leadership Cohort by Intuitive Performance, a unique program that offers unparalleled support to managers on every step of their leadership journey. Our program features evidence-based assessments, workbooks, group coaching, and interactive learning experiences to help you level up your leadership skills. Reach out today to apply to one of our upcoming cohorts. Until next time, take care and stay curious.